Welcome to Damaging Ignorance. Damaging ignorance is important because whoever controls your language of discourse controls your reality. Every story has two sides to it. On this show, we challenge the dominant discourse of the week. We challenge the dominant discourse not because our side is right, but because the other side is wrong. We offer you the actual position of things, and we are rarely wrong. And even if we are wrong, it is because we do not choose to be right. Professor, gentlemen, I'll get right onto the first principality of ignorance that we have to damage. So the first principality of ignorance we have to damage is that we must go to a referendum. The referendum was not the game of primary thrust. The game of primary thrust is a change of the Constitution through parliamentary initiative.
The state conceptually is designed as a criminal enterprise. And that is why the world over, the head of state is above the law. And those who work for him also operate within the privilege of being above the law. It is because it is assumed that if you are the head of an organization that is genetically engineered to be criminal, that you shall do a few criminal things. And by criminal is a few things that are outside the law. In this particular case of the referendum, the state can decide to ignore the ruling of the judges and ask them, where will you take us? The lawyers will argue that if we do so, we will be desecrating the thing they call the rule of law. But I want to take them a little bit to school on that the rule of law is not the same thing as the rule by law. I think there was a theoretician we were reading the other day, a legal theoretician, who says that the rule of law is what the law ought to be, not what the law is. It's supposed to be a mega law up here. And actually the sources of it is theology, that there has to be a force above you that will hold you to account as a sovereign, and you will not argue with it. And that becomes a custodian of that rule of law. But what lawyers in town, including some of you guys, tell us is that the rule of law is actually what is known as the rule by law. And when we say that the Uhuru Kenyatta can decide to ignore this ruling, what I mean by that is he can argue that the will of 5.2 million people pronounced itself when we said we want the referendum by signing into that petition. Then is it 44 county assemblies pronounced themselves? They said we want this referendum. How many MPs?
235.
235 said we want the referendum. And how many senators? 52 senators. And then 5 guys, nondescript, really, in terms of popular locus, come up and they say that the will of the 5.2 million, the will of the 44 county assemblies, the will of the 235 members of parliament who represent the sovereign. And remember once again that the sovereign, what does Article 1 of the
Article 1 of the Constitution says all sovereign power belongs to the people, and the people can exercise that either directly or indirectly
through their elected representatives.
Yes, so they exercise that particular sovereign power through Parliament by saying we want to have this BBI thing, and then a cabal of 5 judges say that you're not going to do it because we have said so. Now, there's no place you will take us. When I say that the state is constituted as a criminal enterprise, what I really mean is that with regard to BBI, although they can disobey the law, and the judges will take them nowhere, because judges in any case are also a function of a sovereign will.
Absolutely. Yeah.
They have not appointed themselves, they're appointed by the people and ratified by the president.
Absolutely. They are sworn in at State House.
Sworn in at State House.
Yeah.
So they can decide to ignore it.
Yes.
But my hypothesis, and I have said this repeatedly on this forum, is that all along the BBI was a decoy. And that is the criminality, the criminal thinking of the state. It was all along a decoy. The idea was not to go for a referendum. The idea was to take this particular bill into Parliament. Because what is the point of having a referendum if you can pass everything you want to pass through Parliament? The Constitution allows you to do it. These 5 judges who did this ruling also told Uhuru, well, if you don't like our ruling, you can go to Parliament. And who knows that the judges were also not working with? No, with Uhuru. For purposes of telling him, you go to Parliament. Then he says, all right, say you go to Parliament. That's what we're going to do. But 255 is the article that can be used to ensure that we push for Uhuru goes into Parliament and has at least 80% of the things in BBI passed.
Implemented in Parliament.
Implemented within Parliament.
Yeah.
And let me add this, actually 2 things. One, that already when 235 MPs passed BBI, that was a dry run. He was testing the waters. He said, do I have the numbers in Parliament?
Yes.
Or you only need 233
Yes.
to pass a constitutional amendment.
Absolutely.
He had 235.
Yes.
He has 75% of Senate. He only needs 66%. So he's already tested the waters, and he has seen that if we take this bill into Parliament,
it's going to pass around like this.
It's going to pass just like this.
Yeah.
And but in the meantime, the things that would not pass within Parliament, he can blame them on a judiciary. Say we wanted to bring you CDF to the wards, but me, I really wanted to do it as Uhuru Kenyatta. But what happened? It is these judges. So what you're saying is that the judiciary, by saying no BBI, have told us status quo remains. They've told us that you can hold elections for 126 days, lose 1 billion shillings every single working hour, as we did in 2017, and kill 1,300 people every single year, every single election cycle, as we have done in the past. So basically, they are okaying an idea whose time is long gone, and that's why I'm saying either Uhuru can disobey it, or maybe Uhuru and Raila took us for a joyride in this thing called BBI, knowing too well that the judges will behave the way they did. And then the things that will not pass because the judges said we don't pass them, we'll blame them on judiciary. So effectively what these judges have done is that they have given Uhuru Kenyatta an easy way. Why are you spending 14 billion doing a referendum if you can achieve in Parliament within a very short time, in an afternoon, all the things that you require, and you can do it almost immediately? Not to add that, if it's going to be a parliamentary process, some of the changes that some of the ODM politicians have been asking for, they can change it. This is not the popular thing that was brought to us from the county assemblies. So they can draft a completely new bill. And we'll pass it in Parliament, and we are all happy. In the meantime, and the Kenyans need to know this, the change in the structure of government, the national government, which is not affected by Article 255, remains, which means that we will have a Prime Minister, non-executive Prime Minister, we'll have 2 deputies, and Cabinet Secretaries' names will be changed from Cabinet Secretary to Cabinet Minister. If we were looking for 22 cabinet ministers, We can now say unlimited,
Yes.
so that we can throw everybody inside.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If we are looking for, the court the other day say that CASs, who are also assistant ministers,
Yes.
are unconstitutional.
Yes.
We can create position of assistant minister,
Yes.
unlimited.
Yes.
Then you can have a government like Kibaki had. He had 44 ministers and 200 assistant ministers. And everybody is happy. So the point we're making to you guys is that BBI was a decoy. Yeah, it was a bind in a sense. If the court said it can go ahead, we're going to go to a referendum. If they say don't go to a referendum, Uhuru is still okay. But the losers are the people. The people who are also articulated in Article 1 of
The Constitution.
sovereign power rests
Belongs
with the people.
Yeah. The second principality of ignorance we have to damage is about the law. The law can be disobeyed. The political philosopher John Locke broke down law into three: the rule of good law, the rule of mediocre law, and the rule of bad law. Now, according to Locke, mediocre and bad law must be ignored.
In my view, the judgment that was made by these judges this week can only but constitute or can be said to be construed as the rule of mediocre law. I refuse to give it the rule of bad law, because badness in itself has some essence. Badness has some celebration that you can create out of it, because there's some kind of thinking that has gone into it. But mediocre is laziness. And conceptually, the rule of mediocre law must be, and the rule of bad law must be disobeyed. Because a city is only as good as the law that governs it. That was according to Plato. But the reason why you also disobey bad law in this instance is because I keep telling you guys that there is what we call this is political philosophy 101, political science 101 also, stuff I used to give to my students at University of Orbit in the 1980s. There is what we call the general will, there's what we call the popular will, and there is what I am calling the will of the wig. The will of the wig is a will as exercised by the judges who wear funny Muzungu type of wigs. And they have decided, Ibn Mutunga has already told us that Kenya is going to be like Israel. They were ruled by judges, so the judges are going to be ruling us. So the rule of the wig. Now the rule, or rather the general will, is that which is construed to be good for all of us. For the commonwealth of all is a general will. That's according to contractarian theorists. And the popular will is a will that prevails in a particular moment in time. And that is why the popular will has to be revised every 5 years in this country. We have to find out if the popular will is still resident in Uhuru Kenyatta, or we want to move it to Raila Odinga. So the popular will has to be revised constantly. But the general will is what we codify into a constitution. And once we codify it as a constitution, we throw in Article 1. Sovereign power shall be exercised by or rest with the people. When we say that, basically what we are saying is that there is the general will is with the people, or it's an expression of the desires of the people. Now, when 5 guys, from where? One is from Muranga here, and I'm calling them nondescript because they have absolutely, the only locus they have is the appointment letter they received from Uhuru Kenyatta, acting on behalf of the general will, the sovereign, or the custodians of sovereign power. Now, when they decide that we are going to overturn the general will. It is not popular will they can overturn. And they overturned it 2017. When we popularly said 51 point something percent Uhuru Kenyatta, they said no, they overturned it. But you cannot overturn the general will. And that is what they are attempting to do. Now, if you attempt to overturn the general will, and you lawyers, you like to give yourselves too much credence. Let me finish this one. I was about to speak in Kikuyu. The custodian of the general will is the person who has also been entrusted with the monopoly over instruments of violence. So, who is that person? It's the military. So the custodian of the constitution, you lawyers of Kenya, including your mediocre thinking, the custodian of the constitution is not the judiciary. The judiciary is only an interpreter. It's like a typewriter. Yeah? But the custodian is the military. Now, when you start messing up with the general will, in whose custody is the military, you're messing up with the Praetorian order, as we would call it in political science. So there has to be an end to this entire process. And in my view, that end is not going to be within the judicial circles. If they push this too much, they are inviting Praetorian intervention. By Praetorian, I mean they're inviting the military, because the military is a custodian of the will that is general, the will of the people. It is very curious to us that actually the positions occupied by the Deputy President and his allies found themselves directly into this particular judgment. Now, the worry I have currently, and this is where these fellows are going, that's why we must tell them that the alternative to the order that is in place is a Praetorian order. Where they're going with this thing, there is a bench that has been appointed, you told me about it, to hear a case on the dissolution of parliament. Now we will tell the public what the decision, if you're to do a simulation, what they are likely to come up with. That they will say that Uhuru should dissolve parliament, and the dissolution order was to be effected immediately. So like today, when we order to release the papers, you're going to dissolve parliament. Once you dissolve parliament, you should also know that you are going home as well. So basically, they will dissolve Uhuru's government, dissolve parliament, and say that that is basically the end of the Uhuru regime. Now, when you have a situation where the judiciary makes judgments that are not enforceable, you're telling Uhuru Kenyatta to resolve himself, and you are sending the dissolution order to a policeman who reports to him. You're basically turning yourself into a cartoon. And this is what the judiciary has become right now.
The third principality of ignorance we have to damage is about what people believe of the judiciary. The judiciary are not a house of bishops. They are not a house of people with goodwill. For the most part, they are a fellowship of thugs the world over.
Do you remember the movie Pelican Brief?
Oh yes, book John Grisham.
Yeah. Although it is fiction, it was about thuggery in the judicial system. Even a similar book written by the same guy, The Farm, was about thuggery. Actually, the fellowship of thug goes beyond the judiciary. It is the judiciary and the lawyers. And then because the whole idea of the rule of law emanated from the church, there is a reverence we give to that whole notion of the rule of law. There's a reverence we also give to the ones that have been appointed to be custodians of that rule of law. Again, rule of law is not rule by law.
Yes.
Rule of law is that which is good for country. Now, that reverence we give to the custodians of the rule of law is what makes us believe that the judges and the courts are sacred institutions. But dear Kenyans, that place is a swamp. And judiciaries the world over, having borrowed from that traditional religious foundation, have become a fellowship of thugs. I couldn't agree more. And that is the reason why they need to be tethered. For you to believe that you go to court to get justice, you're lying to yourself. You're still using the old mode in your head that they have their origins in the church.
They are contradicting themselves, because now they're saying that nothing legitimate can come out of a BBI process that has been endorsed by 5 million Kenyans, 44 county assemblies, and a parliament, as we said. For them to say, to delegitimize that, and yet just last year, Justice Mativo in March, in a judgment, said that President Uhuru was acting within his powers in pursuing a noble constitutional requirement. He used the word noble, a noble constitutional requirement, and that his decisions were proportionate, they were rational, and they were legal.
He said that, and he's in the same level of the court.
They had power as a high court judge, and it was a constitutional matter, and gave it the green light.
Gave it the green light?
He dismissed that petition last year.
So basically what we are saying here is that we're having a dysfunctional judiciary. But it's not the first time we have been told that.
Oh yeah.
We were talking about that earlier.
Absolutely. Justice Richard Quach, 1998, he did a report on, I think, corrupt judges and the administration of the judiciary. And there are corrupt elements that were found there. 2003, Kiretu Murungi was a Justice and Constitutional Affairs Minister, appointed Justice Aaron Ringera, who did a radical surgery, and there were a couple of some rotten apples within the judiciary there. So it would not be the first time to do it. Maybe we need one to happen now.
Especially considering that 2 of the judges sitting on this 5-judge bench were amongst the
41
who were supposed to be promoted. So maybe they're personalizing this issue and throwing it back in the face of 5 million Kenyans.
You know, Uhuru Kenyatta is a very patient man. There is no president who's been bullied by institutions and the public as much as he has. But they bully him, he keeps his cool. It's because there's something maybe he knows that we don't know. Now, we were told that he refused to swear in the 41 judges.
Correct.
The 2 appellant judges who sat in this particular bench and others. He refused to swear them in because he had information from NIS of some wrongdoings. Some shady dealings. Now, is it possible that, let's not say is it possible, we want to encourage our friend DCI Kenoti. Kenoti has a lot of fire, and we want that fire to start burning again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let him start investigating some of these charges, and let him not be stopped, please. Yeah, interrogate some of these charges. If indeed there was a dossier against them, have them tried. That's the only way we'll begin draining the swamp that is a judiciary. But I think we must conclude by saying a few things. One, when the rule of mediocre law becomes the order of the day, because as I said earlier, badness has virtue, and so does goodness. But mediocrity is worse than being bad. If the rule of bad law or mediocre law has become the order of the day, where judges are contradicting themselves, where judges are quoting Wikipedia's authorities that have been written by first-year students in some banana republic somewhere in Latin America, not in Africa. if that's what they are relying on, that mediocrity then has to be replaced by the doctrine of civil necessity, and not as interpreted by law, but that doctrine basically it has been applied severally, hasn't it? Yes. Where?
In Nigeria.
In Nigeria, when President Yaradua is in hospital for a prolonged period of time.
Capacity.
Yeah, and they didn't have any transition mechanism. They invoked that to make Goodluck Jonathan succeed him.
Can you explain a little bit what the doctrine is
The doctrine of civil necessity makes lawful that which is otherwise unlawful. And, it kicks in when there's a constitutional crisis of stupendous proportions, but it comes in to solve that problem once and for all.
Yeah.
And to give it a solid justification.
And it recognizes that law is supposed to serve a purpose, not unto itself.
Law in itself, and that's the reason why the whole idea of everlasting clauses that were quoted by those your judges, that is constitutional nonsense. It is also political nonsense, because you cannot have an everlasting clause. That's still again latching onto the religious aura and religious authorities that give law effect. Because when you say it's everlasting, it's like the everlasting Father. You're borrowing that particular connotation. But lastly, every election, succession election in Kenya has attracted a constitutional crisis and political assassination. Not political assassination, but actual assassinations. Assassination is killing somebody. The recourse we can have in the constitutional crisis will be the doctrine of civil necessity, making lawful that which is unlawful. If we go to Parliament to pass these particular changes, and the changes then we are told by those who are judges, those who are judges, they tell us that no, you cannot pass this because you want to have 1,300 people killed every single election cycle, because we want to have 1 trillion shillings lost, because we want to every election cycle, because we want to have ethnic majoritarianism, where only 2 tribes, and in this particular case, William Ruto, his deputy will have to be a Kikuyu. So you have a perpetuation of Kikuyu Kalenjin dominance. In other communities, some of you Luyas
Cannot sit on the seat.
Cannot sit on the seat because it is ours. That's what the judges are telling us. Now, if we say no to that, and 5.2 million people say that, Parliament said no to all those misnomers, and so did the Senate. Then 5 guys said no. You cannot have what you're talking about. We have to go back to the Ferrari presidency. We have to go back to the ethnic majoritarianism of the dominance of two communities. Once they bring that kind of constitutional and political nonsense, then we must make lawful that which is otherwise not lawful. So if they say, forget about it, for the referendum, and then you take it to Parliament and then they kill it. That's where that doctrine of kicks in. Number 2, assassinations. I'm very nervous about a gentleman whose name I'm inclined not to mention. because he is my friend. I think he was my friend, David Day. But then I've said this in the past. If he was not my friend, I would have said the following. Yeah? I would have said that this guy is a psycho. In fact, one of the things that Kinoti would do well for this country is to go and establish the mental record of this guy called David Day. Really. And the records are there. And I say he's psycho because now he is the one, is co-driver to William Ruto. He told William Ruto the other day to assassinate Uhuru Kenyatta so that he can become president. It was in the public domain. Now you cannot tell me that that man is okay here. Or maybe he is, I don't know. But secondly, if he was not my friend, I would have also attacked him on this. I would not attack him on this, but now if he was not, I have to attack him on this point. He was a man who was behind the secession movement. When country was burning, and he kept on telling us country will burn, he spoke about splitting Kenya into two. Yeah? Now, that kind of thinking has moved into the house of William Ruto. The judges are now in bed with the thinking of William Ruto. And then showing total disrespect for the president, calling him disdain, no disrespect, calling him Mr. Uhuru Kenyatta as opposed to His Excellency the President. If the same judges are going to be telling us very soon that Uhuru Kenyatta must go home, then we must worry, in my view. But the long and short of things is that the referendum only killed 20% of what needed to be done. Stopping the referendum rather. 80% can still continue, and the 20% that we could not achieve, will blame it on
on the judiciary, on the 5 judges.
But do they even have a conscience? If they are a fellowship of thugs, they don't have a conscience. However, the one without a conscience more than them is a state. Because again, you have to go back and say, Kenyans, fellow Kenyans, the state is conceptually, historically constituted as a criminal enterprise. That's why the head of state is above the law. So if the judiciary thinks they have sufficient criminality and gangsterness, the gangster index is located within the state.
Now, it is our hope that we have damaged some ignorance. We also hope that we have exposed the owners of the Ignorance Project. Remember, things are not as bad as they seem. Or are they?